Coffee is a big part of my day. Not only does it help me get through the morning, but I just really love the taste of good quality beans. Trade is a subscription service that brings great coffee from indie roasters all over the country right to your door. Tell Trade what you typically like, whether it's espresso or single origins or even decaf, even how you like to make your coffee, and they will recommend the right beans for you. Or you can just choose from over 450 different coffees. Then you select how often you'd like the coffee delivered to you. Shipping is always free, by the way. And if you need to skip a week or so, just do that. You can do it. No charge at all. Then pick back up when you're ready to get beans delivered to your door again. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to get started with Trade today and start getting some of the best coffees in the country delivered to your door. That's unitedwedrink.com/trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, co-workers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another new episode of the United We Drink podcast right here on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and I'm doing this by myself. It feels like a long time since I've had to record one of these intros. Who knows? It might have been a couple days, but it's because we have a guest. Yes, Kevin will be joining us later. You know, that guy's always around somewhere. But we are joined by our friend Dustin Jeffers. He is the director of brewery implementation at NextGlass, which, if you don't know who NextGlass is, they're the parent company for a lot of things that you probably do know, like Untappd, Beer Advocate, Osner, Hop Culture, Ollie, a bunch of brewery industry adjacent systems. He works with them. He used to work in brewing. He used to be at Saltwater Brewery. He used to be at Three Sons down here in South Florida. But he is no longer in the actual brewing industry, and he's transferred over to something close, but not really in it. And we wanted to talk to him about that transition and what it's like. So without any further ado, let's get into talking with our friend Dustin Jeffers. Well, Dustin, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Dustin is in a very unique position. I guess it's not unique to be getting out of the brewing industry. There's a lot of people doing that.
Voluntarily and involuntarily.
Yes. But he's had quite an interesting journey from being a owner / brewer to a director of ops, essentially, and now being out of the industry, but working adjacent with NextGlass, the parent company for Untappd, Beer Advocate, Hop Culture, have your hands in, and with Ollie, the software now. So Let's talk a little bit about how you got into the business. When I met you, you were opening up Saltwater in Delray Beach. Was that your first go around in the brewing industry?
Yeah, so I moved down to Florida for grad school in FAU. So I was going to grad school for speech pathology, and we were homebrewing.
For what?
Speech pathology, so nothing related to brewing, business, any of that
What
stuff
is that?
at all.
What is that?
So I really want to work in schools, being like a speech pathologist, doing artic, language therapy, stuff like that.
Okay.
And while we were opening Saltwater and that was all going on, I was actually working at Coral Spring Hospital in the NICU doing feeding therapy, because that kind of falls under speech pathology. So in the NICU, feeding therapy with babies, and then also a lot of like feeding, swallowing studies with like stroke victims and stuff like that. So nothing related to school or working in a school. But that was like my second externship. So while all that was going on, saltwater was getting built out. I was in the right place, the right time. I was homebrewing in my cousin's art studio, who was right behind FAU. And Lee, who is the main owner of Saltwater, saw what we're doing in there. Pete did all the labels for Saltwater, all the artwork. He was like a really big into the like fish art as it was already, so it kind of worked in perfectly with the concept. And then Lee's son Chris was out in California with the huge, crazy brewery boom. So he pretty much wrote up the business plan. And then their friend Bo worked for a distributor. So kind of had all those sides covered. And then we had a brewer from Montana that had his own brewery for a bunch of years. And he kind of like helped us out in the beginning. And yeah, I was able to graduate. I'd like leave the hospital and go to the brewery and help like paint a wall or do something crazy. And then started as the assistant brewer when we opened in December. And yeah, from there, it was kind of like a crazy growth path in the industry. So the original brewer, he left after a couple years. So I kind of took on more responsibility there. But during that time, I was really passionate about like the systems in brewing and keeping track of everything, doing the taxes, which sounds weird. I actually like loved end of the month, end of the quarter, the torture of brewery tax.
I did not. I was good at it, but I dreaded doing that every month and then quarter too.
I'm a nerd for spreadsheets.
I'm kind of with you. I just finished, doing. I have an audit next Thursday, and I've got everything's signed up so well that I'm like, oh, bring it on! I love these freaking audits. So,
to me, it's kind of like when you like power wash, and when you're done power washing, everything's like clean. To me, like end of the month. I
just did power washing yesterday.
Do you hate
like
that
when
too,
everything
Mike?
adds up?
Yes. Well, okay. So I love it if I have an actual gas powered one, but I don't personally. I have one of the electric ones, and you have to get like so goddamn close to the concrete to really get anything off, because you either have the really skinny one that does the job from a distance, or the one with some spread does nothing unless you're up close. And my back hurts, my hands hurt because the lock for the handle doesn't work, so I have to hold down the handle the entire time. That's for another podcast. So you did a lot of pretty much like on the job training at Saltwater. Like you learned everything on the fly just as you were going.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people helped out, which is why I'm always very open when everyone comes to me for like questions that's starting out. So like Fran from Tequesta, he let me go up before Saltwater was even open and like brew a couple days there and learn their system. Ryan from Funky was always very open with me and always very helpful. So I listened to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books, but it was also nice to have a bunch of people close to us that were all really nice and open about everything. So yeah, with that, yeah, go ahead.
Those were the old days, though. I mean, there was there was much fewer of us at that time, and I felt like you could keep track of everyone in the industry, and we all did get along because all the people you talked about. I mean, obviously, I worked for Funky, but like Fran, Matt Webster, like went up there and brewed with them multiple times, and they basically helped teach me things I had no idea existed because I was just a schmuck home brewer. So yeah, I think a lot of us had a very similar career path going at almost concurrently, maybe 1 year behind or 1 year ahead or whatever. I think it was all kind of like lined up.
Kevin, were you still with us at the previous brewery when Saltwater opened, or were you at Monks when.
What year did Saltwater open, Dustin?
We were 2013. I'm pretty sure you were at the lounge still, because the main brewery wasn't open yet.
If the main brewery wasn't open yet, then I was still at the lounge. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so hard to to remember. So Saltwater opened in 2013.
Yeah, we were December of
God
2013. We got in there
I-
right under the.
I didn't realize that was. I thought it was a few years after being at Due South, or that Due South opened. But man, that was pretty damn close.
Yeah.
Also, I broke my own rule by saying the brewery name on the podcast.
You have to drink. Speaking of drinks, and not to cut off the
I didn't ask what we're
the
drinking.
biographic portion of this podcast, but I'm also actually always very interested, Dustin, and we've had so many great conversations over the years, especially back when this industry was smaller and we saw each other more often at events. But I know you're really into classic beer styles, and we've really nerded out of that before. So super interested in what you're drinking tonight, and don't disappoint me.
Yeah, so I figured I'd break out something special. I'm doing a 2019 Red Poppy from Lost Abbey, because Red Poppy is my favorite beer ever. So I also did correct glassware. Yeah, I have. Yeah,
Didn't disappoint.
This is my all-time go-to beer, and I have my 2 broken fridges outside that sit around 45 degrees all the time. So I have my proper cellar, and this is the hardest thing for me to hold on to because I always want to drink them.
That beer is definitely up there as one of the best beers of all time.
From Lost Abbey, what was the beer that was a blend of their imperial stout and barley wine? Remember?
Deliverance or
Deliverance?
Share. Yeah.
Okay, Deliverance sounds about right.
No, Angel Share was a barrel age blend of a few different beers, if I remember right.
But
I'm
Deliverance,
pretty sure Deliverance was.
Deliverance
Okay, I
sounds
don't
right.
remember what Deliverance was.
I love a bottle of that stuff.
Got a pretty extensive cellar.
Yeah, I have
I
lot
love
of Lost
10
Abbey.
Commandments from Lost Abbey. I think it had raisins in it. It was like a Belgian dark strong with raisins. I love that beer so much. And I don't know if they still make it. I'm gonna pull it up as I'm here.
They have
quite a portfolio.
Yeah, they have a crazy story right now, pulling back and all that stuff, changing their whole method.
Well, I mean, I think that speaks directly to. I mean, listen, Mike and I talk so often. I feel like every single episode of our podcast is about we're Charlie Brown and the brewing industry sucks. But we try to keep things upbeat. We did a couple episodes recently about classical beers that we love that are no longer with us, and we try to put a decent spin on this and what the future looks like for the craft beer industry. But I think talking about your past and what you've done in the industry itself as a brewer, as an owner, and running ops, doing your favorite thing in the world, taxes, but rolls into what you talk about, what Lost Abbey's doing. I mean, we just mentioned probably 5 beers that we love. Don't even know if they're in production anymore. Back when we got into this game, those beers you'd have to trade your firstborn child for. But now some of them aren't in production and they're pulling back. Well, why? Because the industry's suffering. And what do you do when the industry's suffering? Do you pivot and do something else? Do you want to talk about kind of getting out of the industry? Was there a transition that was thoughtful from you? I really want to get out, or was it just something was thrown on your lap and you were got to do this?
Yeah. So with Saltwater is heavy distro. That was kind of when we opened, when Due South opened, Funky, all that is try to do as much distro as possible. There's a lot of room for it. Kind of be that regional idea. And that's stressful. When you're living and dying by Publix resets, that can put a lot of stress on you.
Especially at your size. Because I know what your fermentation capacity was, and I've done the numbers, and that was a losing proposition from day one.
Oh yeah,
you can't be profitable there.
Yeah. You have to have good can distro, and then make sure that you have a lot of tap handles. and rely on your distributor and reps to go out and like make your money on taps, make your volume on cans, and then hope that the tasting room brings you all your
Rocks.
profit.
Yeah.
So that was stressful. And right like at the start of COVID, Three Sons was just opening their tasting room. And Corey would come over, help him like jump kegs for events, stuff like that. Really liked what he was doing, liked the idea of like heavy barrel aging because I like, besides classic styles, I also like big barley wines, barrel aged beer, stouts, all that. So had the opportunity to get on with them as their director of ops, which is what I kind of currently was at Saltwater at that point. So it was fun going in and having like 170 like wood barrels to mess around with and all that. So did that for a while. And the thing that really pushed me out of the like brewery life and into now working with Next Glass was honestly 100% like my kids. So they were 2 and 4, just turning 3 and 5 at that point. And it was like, oh, you have to like help in the tasting room at night again, or like you're not going to be home tonight. Oh, you're doing something again this weekend. And my 5-year-old was just starting to like say stuff like that, and that's kind of like a, knife to the heart. So
that destroys you. Yes.
yeah. So with Next Glass, I was like beta testing a lot of their ERP system, which is kind of like where I mostly base my day-to-day stuff in now. And kind of went to them and said, I think it'd be great if like you had someone that had industry knowledge for this stuff and be able to talk to breweries about like how they could actually use this in the day-to-day. And luckily they had a solutions consultant position that they were starting up. And I was already using the system, was kind of doing a bunch of stuff in it already. So I was lucky that they kind of accepted my request, and I jumped into that. So it was a nice transition. I don't know if I could ever like fully leave the beer industry. Like there's a bunch of speech pathology jobs open, so I could easily have done that. But I am super passionate about beer and the industry and the people. So this was like a nice transition that I could still be a part of it. But working from home, I'm home for dinner every day. We can like, with my wife being a SLP, she works in a school, so she's off on summers. We can like do a trip and I can just bring my computer anywhere I go and still do work. So it was like the right time in my family's life to kind of move out of the industry.
So if I'm getting you right, the industry did not run you off. You just wanted to transition into something that was just better for your personal life and things of that nature. That's good to hear because, the industry does run a lot of people off, and the stresses that you're talking about on trying to live in 3 different avenues. You talk about the saltwater with packaged, distribution, draft, and tap room. That's maddening. And that will drive anyone crazy. And, Mike has seen this longer than I have. I was in a position where I had to do multiple things consistently, but Mike's also had to wear multiple hats at a brewery, working in the back, doing marketing at the same time. And, you see the stresses that puts on people. So now your work-life balance is much, much better. You're still working in the industry. Are you really, I mean, you said all things you're enjoying about it. Is there anything that you miss? Is there anything that you're like, I kind of wish this was going in a different direction, or this is frustrating?
I would say the one thing I miss from like brewing, which would happen also when I would be even more on the actual like ops side, is like honestly graining in. Like to me, that's the most like zen, comforting thing in the world. Like just opening bags, putting them in the mill, watching them go down. Like that was my peaceful time, because no one would ever bother you. It's usually early in the morning. So I do miss that. At Three Sons, I miss just being around barrels, just because I don't know, barrels and palm trees are like the best things ever. Like they just kind of like bring you calm, nice to look at. Barrel tasting days were always awesome. Trying to like figure out blends. So some of that stuff I miss. But I would say I'm much happier and much relaxed now. I was a glutton for punishment though, so you have to kind of be that way to enjoy the industry. 'Cause like you said, you're pretty much running a hospitality plus a production plus a distribution business at the same time, and transitioning between all three of those avenues. And then at Three Sons, like there's some hype behind us, so you also have to look at like what people are saying, making sure people want to still trade for your beer. Stuff that didn't have to worry about it, saltwater. Them saying like our imperial stout that ended at 18 Plato was thin. That's like, what are you talking about? Like, I want to make T-shirts that say like "thin is the new diacetyl" because that's like the new hot word. Like, oh, this is a giant imperial stout. It tastes thin. Does it really?
Aren't people that like craft beer the worst? I mean, let's just throw that out there. Like, it looked like you had something you wanted to say. I didn't mean to jump on top of you.
No, I'm pretty much going to say, this is all our fault. We did this. I'm sorry. Yeah. I didn't want to interrupt, but I kind of disagree with Kevin on the thing of like that beer didn't force you out. It kind of did by being like your life changed to what you needed in it. Beer didn't change for you, so you took the ability to make a change for your life for the better. And I think that that's fantastic. And I mean, I made that step kind of for myself about a year and a half ago by stepping away from production and saying to my boss, like, hey, I have kids now. I have two that are the same age, and they need me. And I was able, luckily, because of them and my wife's job, to be able to step back and work part time and just be able to take care of my boys and work mostly from home and go in a few days, do what I need to do photo wise and all of that. And I'm very grateful to that. And it is partially because beer was being beer, and my body hurt, and I was working long days, and I needed to be here for my family. There was something else. Oh, I did look up. Dustin was 100% right. Deliverance was the beer that you were thinking of, Kevin. Blend of bourbon barrel aged Serpent Stout and apple brandy barrel aged Angel Share.
Yes.
So yeah, and they still do make that on occasions. It says.
I remember losing my mind over that beer, just thinking that it was just like the most perfect thing I ever tasted in my life.
Yeah.
So,
by the way,
Tommy
Kevin,
Arthur
what are
is
you
one of the
drinking?
people that I would still nerd out about. I was behind him when you're at Savor. Like, we were in that middle square, and I went and brought him. I think we brought a barley wine. I was like so nervous to like talk to him. There's like only a couple of people I feel like in the industry that I'd still like kind of geek out over. He's like the number one.
Nice.
I went to. Oh, well, I'll get back to you. Because this, I'm going off of Tommy.
How dare I? Mike was speaking. How dare I throw it back to him and ask him to complete his thought? I'm a jerk. No, Mike, please
I
go
wanted
ahead.
to run with the talk about Tommy because I feel like Tommy was like this big icon when I was first getting into beer, and I met him in Boston at like Bunk Fest in 2019. This was when I was living in Philly. My wife and I, we just decided it was a summertime festival. Like, let's go have a weekend in Boston and drink some sour beers. And Tommy was pouring Lost Abbey beers, and like he was such a pleasant dude. And what was so funny, walked right up to the table and had Red Poppy and Duck Duck Goose. And it's like, why is no one in line for this? And or not Duck Duck Goose, it was Cable Car. Sorry. But I was like, I chatted with him for a couple of minutes, and he was so nice. And I was like, man, you are you kind of had this reputation as being like a badass, and and you're such a sweet person. I was so blown away, and it just was. It will always be a thing that I remember about Lost Abbey, along with their incredible beers. Going back to what I was.
Remember the Beer Advocate comics?
Oh
Someone
yeah.
used to post. Yeah.
Mitch Steele was very prominent in those as well.
Yeah.
Kevin, what are you drinking? We never got
Oh,
we're gonna splice these
It's your
in
turn now,
throughout.
Kevin.
just listen. It's a long conversation. You'll be in the next 35 minutes. I actually already finished my first beer. I did the 1906 Reserva from Estrella. And I love this beer. This was a beer that I just did on an Old Favorite Friday a few weeks ago. Shout out to Tom Barris, as always. Love you, man. And I just opened up one of my last Anchor Porters. I got a couple 6-packs when I thought you were asking me to hold it up more, and I realized you were making the sign of the cross. I got the last couple 6-packs that I could find on the shelves of my local Total Wine, and I love the 1906. I'm loving this even more. This is just such a goddamn good beer.
What is 1906? I'm not familiar with that.
They call it I believe they call it a Hellesbock. Yeah, Hellesbock. It is. They do a couple beers in the 1906 series, but this is just a really good malty, clean lager. Tons of fruity flavors. It's just really, really nice. Really, really well balanced. Another one of those beers I think a lot of people are biased of because Estrella is such a massive brand internationally. I mean, obviously in Spain, I mean, I've heard them called the Budweiser of Spain, right? So if you have that reputation, a lot of craft beer people in the U.S. are going to kind of stub their noses at you. But one of the things about the Old Favorite Friday series is always talking about how good some of those beers can be. And that I had that beer for the first time like a year and a half ago. It was just randomly, I was out on vacation and I saw it and I went, wow, okay, put this in the memory banks. Next time I get a chance to see this, I'm going to pick this beer up. So
when I was in Spain, Estrella was all over the place. Estrella Dom, and I drank plenty of that, and it was fantastic beer.
Great beer. Mike, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking cider and booze. I'm having a.
I have news for you, Mike. Cider is booze, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I'm drinking apples in both of my things. I'm having Puro Pinolero. Yep, those are words. From my friends at Plowman Ciders in PA. It's a cider with Nicaraguan hibiscus. And then I also have some cask strength Laird's apple brandy that I'm having as well. And this will make you breathe fire. It is 120 proof and stings, but is delicious.
Dustin, Mike didn't tell you, but he felt like he had to get really messed up to be to have you on the show tonight. I don't know what it was.
A 10-2 Phillies win over the Braves will help with that.
Oh yeah, I saw they were up 8-2, so I didn't realize they added a couple runs there.
So you're back to Dustin. You're at Next Glass now, and the tree of this company branches off into a lot of different aspects of the adjacentness of craft beer. You want to talk a little bit about all of those little, some of them acquisitions and some wholly made company or brands from within?
Yeah. So Next Glass first acquired Untappd. So that was like the first part of it. And then they kind of built the Untappd for business side of it. So Untappd is the user app. People log in, rate beers, keep track of stuff, all there. And then Untappd for business is like the menus, printed, digital, all that stuff. And now there's also Untappd Data and Insights, which is really fun to mess around with and play with. So it's kind of like seeing some of those trends where certain beer styles are starting to trend up, trend down, where certain accounts, like what beer style is checked into the most there. There's a lot of like cool data that you can pull from that for that breweries distributors can use and look at. So it's kind of like you have VIP or Encompass that tells you where stuff's getting sold. You have Nielsen data that does a lot of the like grocery store scans, but then you have ours that can tell you a lot of like on-premise info, which is missing a lot. So that's kind of all the Untappd stuff. And then after Untappd, they got Beer Advocate. And then after that, they got Hop Culture. And then it was Ollie and Fermentable. So that's kind of like, or sorry, after that was Osner. So that's where I really started using a lot of NextGlass stuff, more on like the beta testing side and getting close with like some of the developers and product guys. So at Three Sons, we started using them for our membership, for our bottles, and doing all of our releases. So it was during COVID, we couldn't have people lining up all the time. And then also running the membership through Eventbrite and spreadsheets was just rough. So Osner handled all that. So I was able to handle the membership, not have spreadsheets. Bartenders could have everything on their phones, made life a lot easier and a lot easier to keep track of stuff. And we were the first ones in Florida to be on it. So I had a lot of kind of like talking with that team on stuff that I'd like to see, stuff that would have helped, testing out new features. And then one of the CBCs was with those guys, and they're like, hey, like, you should check out Ollie. We just acquired them. And that was really just the ordering side of an ERP system. So they're based out of BC, and it handles invoicing, inventory tracking, and a bunch of reporting for that. And then they were just acquiring Fermentable, which handles all the brewery operations on the ERP. So buying all your raw materials, inventory management, production, and then some reporting for taxes. So after both of those were required, they kind of rebranded everything. And we have Ollie Ops, which was Fermentable, and then Ollie Order, which was just Ollie. So that's where most of my life is. I'm in charge of the implementation team now. So we are the ones that get you onboarded onto the system, make sure all your tanks are in, all your current materials are in, inventory, and then get you to start using it. Funny enough, one of the people on my team is a ex-South Florida industry brewery owner as well, Adam Feingold. He
really?
kind of came out of the non-beer industry back into beer adjacent, and he's kind of same as me, like is loving the still being able to be somewhat in the industry, but not the like as hectic day-to-day life that we did have.
Oh, awesome. I haven't talked to Adam in a very long time. Tell him that I said hi. So was Osner an acquisition, or was that a wholly created NextGlass thing?
It was an acquisition. It was called Craft Cellar at first, and
I
then
remember hearing about that. Okay, I think we dabbled in it for a little bit when it was still called Craft Cellar. And then okay.
So, I mean, I know that you are not one of the principal owners of this company, but I mean, do you see this? Do you see this company continue to expand? I mean, when we look at our businesses, and each one of us has had our hands in multiple different breweries, we see all the different people we pay money to do a thing, right? And what I see with NextGlass is they're saying, okay, pay me to do all the things, right? With different companies that specialize in different things. Are there more things coming down the pike? Would you I shouldn't even say that, because maybe you do know some information you can't say, but are there things that you'd want, or things that you think would be low-hanging fruit from your experience in the brewery, where you're like, man, we should sell grain, or we should be a logistics company?
I don't know. Like they're going to be selling raw ingredients soon.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like the next step is like integrating even further a lot of the stuff that we have now. So I know that's always a big talk, since like we have Beer Advocate and Untappd, and like all the beers are in there. How nice would it be if you can go in, create a beer in your system, and then it goes to Osner, goes to Untappd, goes on your menu as coming up because it's in a tank. like some like cool stuff like that, I think is definitely like one of the end goals on the horizon of everything.
Integration.
Yeah. Trace kind of coined, I have it now like on my email signature, like worldwide leader in bev tech, because big like ESPN fans and all. And I think that's kind of the goal, like have everything everyone needs. I know like POS systems are a sticky subject, and I don't know if anyone actually wants to get into dealing with POS systems, but people always ask like, do you integrate with these certain POS systems? And I kind of get on my soapbox on why. When it comes to beer, I've tried to in the past with like other systems, and it always blows up in your face. Like it's great if not to get too like technical about industry stuff, but it's great if you're always going to tap a half keg and then your bartender types a pint sold in the system and it pulls out that little bit of a half keg. But like sometimes you got to throw on a sixtel. Sometimes like you're throwing on a partial keg because it's the end of a packaging run and you want to put it on. And when that happens, that whole integration just blows up. And I feel like you take more time fixing it than it helped you.
Well, that's the value of having you. I mean, I am dumbfounded, and I shouldn't be because this is an industry that I've chosen. But the vast majority of people that are selling me a thing don't know what I need. They just don't know. They have no clue, and they'll never know. And by the way, they shouldn't, because they're also selling to bars and restaurants, and there's 10,000 of them. And if you're working in, I mean, listen, we're getting pretty close to that in South Florida, but unfortunately, but you know, you don't need to know what my business is really. When you go to a company that actually has someone on site that can give you some kind of practical understanding. I had a guy recently contact me about fruit, purees and things of that nature. And I just sent a very nice email back and said, listen, I don't know anything about your company. Can you give me some usage rates? Can you give me some information about anything that I could apply to my business and look at what I have so that I can even decide whether we should talk more?
Yeah.
And he beat around the bush so much and made me feel like an asshole. Yeah. And eventually I was like, there is no need for us to speak any further. Your company is not a fit for my company. Yeah. And he was indignant and he thought that I was being the prick. Like, but he had no idea. The questions I were asking were the questions that a brewer asked, that an owner of a brewery asked. The questions he was responding to was what a salesperson responds to. Most of our, I'm sorry, I just cut you off, but most of our customers are using 7 barrels at a time of my raspberry puree. Like, well, that tells me nothing. Are they using 7 barrels of this in a 100-barrel batch or a 10,000 barrel? I don't know what that means. But sorry, go ahead.
Like,
I've pushed a lot for like us hiring industry people, because I used to run into that all the time with like any tech stuff I had. Is like no one ever actually like worked in a brewery or worked in a bar or worked like on taxes and worked with QuickBooks. So every time we have an opening, I always push for like an ex-industry person, because it's nice when we can hop on a call and someone's talking about like how they're going to handle their Solera, and we know what a fooder is, and then they're shocked by it. They're like, oh, like usually the person I talk to has no idea what I'm talking about. They're like, well, yeah, we do. So I think it does help to have industry people doing the like selling or support side of stuff. Just because like the brewery world's crazy. There's so much nuance to it that people don't realize. Like you have to know a lot of stuff about. You have to know a lot about a lot of stuff. It's not like a little about a lot. It's a lot about a lot. That makes sense.
I mean, when I was an ops manager, like I basically the same way that Kevin was. Like, tell me how this can apply to me and what you've seen with other customers. If you can't tell me that, then I'm not going to go with you.
At the time,
when I've had people with fruits and flavorings reach out, and when they say to me like immediately, we have TTB approved stuff, I'm like, okay, they know what the fuck they're talking about then. Like, tell me more, send me price lists. I can go a little further with you. But for once, like, hey, have you had this approved by the TTB? I don't know what the TTB is. Sorry. Okay, I'm not gonna go into dealing with this. It really goes a long way, even for like sales reps for companies that are really, really directly related, like your grain people, your hop people, your chemical people. Like I was always amazed by Loeffler back in the day when our salespeople were technical because they had brewery experience. Like I'm thinking of like Matt Sprinkle and Brian Campbell that we had back in the day, and even if they didn't know it, they put you up to Dirk Loeffler himself, and he knows what the hell he's talking about because he's been in the experience with this industry, and that goes so far with people in this industry. You get that trust, and they will follow you.
Well, I'll call out too, just because you said that, and I couldn't agree with you more about Loeffler back in the day. But like Zaman Nagel, like you call them up and you say, "I need a part," and you explain something to them, and you talk to someone that's like, "Yeah, gotcha, bro. I know exactly what's going on." But
then it's 6 months before you can get it.
Well, quite possibly. One thing I wanted to kind of mention though, and I think it was very interesting the way you were kind of discussing, how different the experience is and having that knowledge. One of the aspects that we talk about often on this show is, I'll often say, Barrel of Monks is not even in the same business as Funky Buddha. We sell a similar product, but we're in different businesses because of the economies of scale. I mean, we are just different entities. So with your company, do you find that, I mean, some of this is maybe critique that maybe you don't want to go into, or maybe you do, but is this company and are the platforms would not be a proper sentence. So I'm going to correct that right away. Are the platforms gauged for every level of beer? Are they more gauged for larger, more gauged for smaller? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like Untappd for Business is for anyone. As long as you have a tasting room, to be honest, I feel like it's super helpful. Like, we have it for Funky Buddha, but we also have it for like Orchestrated Minds. Both of them have Untappd for Business in there.
And Barrel of Monks.
And Barrel Monks there's so much that you can like do with it. And then Osner, like Barrel Monks has Osner, but Perennial has Osner. Goose Island uses it for the release Proprietors Day. So it's that one. It depends on your style. Like Pulpit Rock uses it for special releases, but like Three Sons was using it. We're very different size. So that one, it depends on your business model, really. I feel like Osner with like what size brewery is right for it. Untappd, I feel like regardless, if anyone's ever had to update menus on their website and then on a chalkboard and then also like print stuff out, like it's such a pain. Like it's worth the money to just like do it once someplace and then it's everywhere.
I mean,
especially if you're
people
smaller.
who say that it's not, but I completely get it. When I was in PA, I worked for a brewery that was a 1-barrel system. We had Untappd for Business. It made changing beers. We had just the iPad that our POS was on also had Untappd for Business, that we could change beers just like that. It's all about what people are willing to do and pay for, and some are going to be like, I would rather throw money at this to make it easier than say, tell a guy named Mike Urevich to make this thing.
Yeah, I'd argue like if you're smaller, it's even more important to get it because your time's more valuable because you're the brewer, owner, tasting room manager. Like put all that together, your hourly rate is higher. So you shouldn't be spending like 30, 45 minutes updating everything. So if you look at it that way, like it's a no-brainer sometimes. And then on the ERP system, since it is two that work together, if you are like a brew pub only and never distributing, you can just do ops. And then being able to see like what your true cost of goods are, you can sell out of bright tanks, keep track of all that info. When you're ordering grain, you can add shipping, add pallet charges, all that stuff, and be able to see like, oh, I added rush shipping onto this, or I put 20 bags instead of 40 on a pallet. So like, what's my actual landed cost of that grain? And everything's batch dependent. So you can really see like, this batch grain was like 72 cents a pound. This one was 75, same exact grain. How's that affecting my like half keg cost in the end?
Oh yeah. And I think that Ollie has really, I haven't gotten a chance to, and honestly, I hope I never have the chance to work with it because I never want to be back into that side of things. But we were changing over to Ollie slightly after I stepped out of the brewery work, having been with Ecos for a number of years, but they like upped their price big fucking time.
Yeah.
And I know that there was a bit of a learning curve, but it seems like the folks in the brewery really enjoy Ollie right now. So like
Awesome.
it has grown. I know new features have been put out, and it's a cost effective one for smaller breweries. And calling ourselves a smaller brewery is sometimes funny, but I mean we are in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes we think of smaller breweries as like, a one barrel system or a half barrel system in a garage somewhere. But when you're producing when you're producing 3,000 barrels, 4,000 barrels a year, you're a small brewery.
No, what's funny though, thinking about all of this is when I started at Copper Point, we were using Ecos, and they're on to Ollie now. When I was in PA, the place that I was in, we one barrel system. We had Untappd for Business. We had Ecos as well, and we were utilizing that. When I was at Due South, we did not have any brewery software. I was doing everything through spreadsheets, and we were double the production that we do at Copper Point. And now I'm looking back at that, and I'm like, I probably lost years off of my life from all of that.
Yeah.
There is something there, Mike, that is hidden in what you just said.
Oh, I know.
And the fact that Due South was doing double the production of Copper Point, it speaks to our industry in general and how dilute everything is, because that is not a just or fair universe. I did, and some of this, by the way, Dustin, you can just say, Kevin, we can talk about this off screen, off podcast, because this is a personal question about your brewery, and this is not appropriate. But do you work on like a sliding scale for smaller breweries? Because that's one of the things that I've looked at. Because I've never used Ecos. I've been quoted on by them. I use a company called Beer Run, and I'll be honest, it's cheap. It's dirt cheap. There are some functionality problems for sure, but it's something that works for me. And I have been contacted by people from Ollie in the past, and I've looked at the pricing and said, for what I need, it doesn't really line up with what I'm going to get out of it for raising even $5 a month or $10 a month or whatever. Even if it's like 10 times as functional, I'm like, I just don't need all those functions.
Yeah.
For anyone out there listening, because by the way, this is an industry heavy podcast. A lot of people listening to this are people in the industry. Do you work with breweries on that, or is it kind of like a one size fits all kind of thing?
It's kind of a one size fits all, but you can have ops only, or you can have ops and order. So if you just need ops, it's a lot cheaper than doing ops and order. So order is if you have a lot of inventory of finished goods. So if you think of ops handles everything from like raw material procurement to actually like packaging your finished goods. And then once that's done, everything goes over to order. And that's where you can do like multi-warehouses, be able to pull like cost of goods sales reports by like a bunch of different filters. We have a CRM system built in as well. So if you have a bunch of sales reps, they'll be able to keep track of like what accounts they're at, be able to pull reports like that. So if you are using like VIP or Encompass or LilyPad and you're really just using the CRM aspect of it, like we're already cheaper than that. Plus you get the actual like sales invoicing part of it also. So it kind of depends on like your business model, like if you're a giant brewery and everything's through the front of house, like think of like Crooked Hammock up in like Carolina, like they have very little distro and everything's through like those couple, like, they're right in Myrtle Beach, like at Barefoot Landing, and it's packed all the time. These just come to mind because I was just there. Like, they may not necessarily need order because it's all going through the front of house, versus a small brewery in California that self distros. Like, they're throwing out like 100 something invoices every month. They would want the order side, but it's also going to make their life a lot easier. Which is why it helps having like industry people, because it's not like one size fits all. You have to see like size of the brewery plus their business model to figure out like what actually like works for you.
Oh, and it also is how much the brewery wants to put into making that system work for them as well. I mean, I I've sat down and played when I was with doing eco stuff and like was like, oh, we could be doing this better. We could do this, like, and just trying to hammer out the cogs on stuff to get as best as I could, and like it's what you put into it as well. Like having the ability to do all of that stuff is important, but it'll ultimately come down to what the brewery and the people there want to put in to better their lives.
Yeah, and that's one of my big like soapboxes, which I feel like I've talked to probably both of you about drunkenly, which I did sober this time at this year's like Florida Brewers Guild conference. Like, it's great if you don't look too deep into your data and be like, oh, like distribution is great. Like, I just need to sell 4 kegs for every one that I do in distro to make the same amount of like revenue on it. But then you look at like what the cost of goods are for it, and then put in like your sales reps and then POS items, all that stuff. And then if you don't look at just your revenue and you look at what your actual like profit is, it turns out it's going to be like 80 kegs to distro for like 7 in the front of house. And when you actually like look at those numbers and dig deep and not just look at cash flow and revenue, but look at profit and how one batch can easily swap like $15 per barrel and what that's doing to your actual keg price. It's great if you look at your half barrel cost or case price just once for one of your cores and look at it another like 3 months from now. But there's a lot of swing in between. If you don't know what your like max and your mins are for a lot of that, like you can be going off of like drastically different numbers and have like a lost leader and not even realize it.
Oh, freight has impacted the cost of goods so much. Like, just even a full pallet of grain is more than double what it was 40 years ago. And that is even if the grain itself wasn't going up, which it did. That hit it so much, and people don't really take that into consideration when they're doing their cost of goods. When I started putting in pallet charges and really running putting our shipping into our orders, it's like, holy fuck, look at the cost.
It's
on this
crazy
stuff.
what like 20 bags instead of 40 on a pallet does to your per pound cost.
Oh yeah,
nuts.
It's amazing how many people are running their businesses off the bank account and just looking at what's coming in and what's going out and having absolutely no idea. I mean, if you want to look at, listen, there's a lot of reasons why the craft beer industry is suffering right now, and especially medium to small breweries. I mean, big breweries are suffering too. They're seeing huge losses. And you talked about like the grocery store culture. I mean, if you're looking at a massive regional brewery that just lost 300 pogs, and what are they going to do with that production that they already have cans for and what have you? I mean, everyone's suffering. But how much of that can directly be related to bad business plans and having absolutely no idea what their profitability is off of a particular item? I've worked at breweries where I've asked, how much do we make off this? And the person that owned the brewery had absolutely no clue. I mean, not even a whisper of an idea of how much they might make off that beer. And even when they want to put those numbers together, as Mike says, they're not taking in shipping costs. They're not taking in labor. They're not taking in any overhead costs whatsoever. And someone like yourself, I mean, I understand you're selling a good, you're selling
Mhm.
a thing, right? This is a capitalist society. You're not doing something to go to your heart, but someone that's going to listen and have a conversation and be open to the idea that if we expose you to these numbers and you can actually accurately project some of this, maybe you can head off some of these problems. I'll just give you a quick anecdote. When you know, I started Barrel of Monks as a partner, but as a brewer. I had nothing to do with the costing. I had nothing to do with the operations. And there was this idea, for whatever reason, that our triple was so expensive to make. And always in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's a good amount of dextrose in that, and it's our house yeast strain, and there's no real specialty malt in it, and that doesn't seem like an expensive beer. But there was this thing like, it's so expensive to make our triple. Well, finally, when I got to the point where I was in charge of this, I ran the numbers and I was like, our triple's like the cheapest beers to make. I mean, it's just not
alcohol doesn't
expensive.
cost much.
Right.
Like,
And then I was like, well, what does that mean for the IPA? What does this mean for the pale ale? What does this mean for the quadruple? Because that's got a bunch of candy sugar. It blew my mind when I started writing real numbers and said, all of this is out of whack. I might be able to charge more for this because it's 9%, but that's money I can put in my pocket. I don't have to give it away, and I don't have to charge $160 a slim because it doesn't make sense to do that, and no one's going to buy it. So, yeah, it's wild when you drill into this stuff what you can find.
And that stuff's out there too, right? If you're looking, like, look at New Belgium and Voodoo Ranger. Like, it's 8-9%, or Juice Force.
The Juice Force is 9.5. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not priced that much higher than normal Voodoo Ranger, but it sells. It's what, the highest increase in sales last year for a beer.
The whole Voodoo family, yeah.
When I would look at our double hazy IPA versus our single, like, there was not that much of a price difference any brewery I was at for those, because like, adding alcohol does not cost that much per barrel. Like, the big cost is hops, especially when you're paying like 17-18 pounds per barrel, or per pound, for some of these hops. Like, that's where all your money comes in. Smoothie sours, like, the money's not coming from the alcohol. The money's coming from 40% fruit puree additions. Like, that's what hits you.
And
I feel like a big.
In those situations, you just have to know that, and you have to pass the cost on. You can't say that I'm going to make this an $18 4-pack of 16-ounce cans. It sounds high to me because I'm old, but you can say I'm going to charge $25 for this and make my money.
Across so much in our industry, it's merchandise too. Like, when you have, like, Dustin's wearing like a really nice hat that is, I assume that's like puff embroidery, or it's at least embroidered.
Yep.
And like, those things cost money. And when you talk to some brewery owners and they see the cost on that, they're like, oh, that's too expensive. You sell it for a higher amount that a lot of people are willing to pay for. There's nothing that says that you have to sell a product for less money than it costs you to make it. That's dumb. That's silly. And when I sometimes hear about people talking like, oh, this hat is gonna cost $10, $11 per piece to make. Like, what do you think that you're going to sell it for? Like, you're not selling it for $12. Like you figure these things out, and people will pay for it. You might have a learning experience here and there, but I mean, you're not going to sell something for less than what you need to on it. It's just silly how much prices sometimes scare people like that.
I always got outvoted on merch. I always wanted to buy like really expensive stuff and mark it up just $10. Like, cheaper stuff, yeah, we would do higher margins. Like, let's just get like bomb ass like clothing and merch, and then just like mark it up just as much as we'd make on the other one, dollar wise, not percentage wise, and like blow through it. Like, who cares if we're relying on our merchandise to make us money and you're a brewery? Like, you're already kind of looking at everything incorrectly. Like if that's what's
that
going to
is that
save
is
you.
correct, but it can. But oh man, it can really add to like there's tons of breweries who are called like t-shirt factories and all of that,
Yeah.
but they like there's tons that make great money off of making great merch, like
Yeah.
quality stuff, good designs, and all of that, and sell it at a premium price. Like people are willing to pay good money for good stuff.
Well, there's some caveats to that. I mean, you have to have a good following. You have to have some kind of platform to get that out there. If you're not getting thousands of people to your doors every day. I mean, I mean, we invested in a lot of kind of more expensive like pool gear. I'm not even saying it was the best stuff in the world, but we had a hard time selling it because, even though we're in Boca and there's a lot of disposable income, the amount of people that walk in the door that want to get that stuff was a little bit less than what we had chosen to, or we would have chosen, I should say. And we did okay on it. We didn't take a bath on it. We didn't lose money, but we certainly didn't, sell it hand over fist. I think you can go dramatically in one. I think when we talk about so much of this stuff, it's just like everything in moderation. Like try some of these like things with like a really cool item and mark it up in a good way so you can make some money, make sure you don't lose anything on it, but give people an opportunity to have something really cool that they want to wear on a regular basis. Make a beer and make sure you have a healthy enough margin on that beer that you're not getting destroyed on it. But also that gives someone a little bit of a deal here or there. But I'll throw this out here to you, Dustin. And we were talking about beer styles and what it actually costs. Like there are beer styles that might cost a little bit too much to make, and the customer base might not be willing to pay that money for it. Right. And this is one beer style that came up in a conversation. I'm going to mention this in my last call was an ESB. Right. You want to make a really great ESB, a classic one, right? Or you want to do kind of an updated version with like some American hops or New Zealand hops or something like that. Is anyone going to pay $18, $20 for a 4-pack of 16-ounce cans of ESB? Or is that a style that people are going to go, well, I'm not going to pay what I pay for a double IPA for that? So there are concessions and considerations we all have to make for not only how much it costs for us to make, but how much the public is willing to pay for it. Because I know for a fact that and this goes right to your bread and butter, take a Pilsner. Ingredients are cheap. Tank time is not. Twice the tank time. Are you making twice the money off of it? Absolutely not. That can be a killer for breweries. People aren't willing to pay the money for it. And we have to look at these things in this way.
First of all, Kevin, shut your mouth on ever saying to put New Zealand hops in a ESB. Blasphemy. Blasphemy, I say.
I'm saying if you want to do something new world, something interesting, something your own little spin on it, I'm just saying.
But I get what, because even doing an ESB like the right way, you're using imported malts that cost more money than just like North American Pilsner and all of that. You want Maris Otter that costs a little bit more, and you have the specialty malts that go into that and all of that. I get what you're saying. I don't have a good segue here. So Kevin, you got to bail me out. I've been drinking apple stuff.
No, I'll bail you out here. Okay, so listen, we're winding this whole thing down, and one of the things that I wanted to really get across in this is that there's a lot of different ways to make money. That's not the best thing to say. Make a living.
That was the best thing. It was.
Make a living, and in the craft beer industry, it's not just being a brewer. It's not just working in a tasting room. It's not just being a sales rep. There are so many businesses around us that support us, and they're pivotal to who we are. And we touched on the things of like the businesses that talk to us, that give the time to try to understand what we do, are the ones that we want to use the most. And I applaud you for moving into that space. There is a little bit of the evil empire idea. There is a little bit of a boogeyman there. And I want to just kind of briefly touch on this to whatever degree you're comfortable with. I don't know. And by the way, I have no assumption you've ever listened to an episode of our podcast, as Lord knows nobody else ever does. So, well, thank you. You're the first one.
Yeah.
But we demonize Untappd.
Yeah.
And I certainly go after Untappd a lot. And it's not because of the platform necessarily. It's because of the people and the way that they use it. And this was not an Untappd rating, by the way. This had nothing to do with Untappd, but it speaks to the mentality. Someone came into our tap room the other day, went on Google, and said, I hate places that don't have alcohol. This place was stuffy and only had beer. 2 stars. They went to a brewery that had beer and got mad. The equivalent of being pissed off that they saw pasta on the menu of an Italian restaurant, right?
Yeah.
We see on Untappd all the time. I hate IPAs. Endless Enigma IPA, 1 star. Okay. So you're part of that infrastructure now. You are, it's part of who you are. Are there any qualms about that? I know you've worked for breweries, you've worked for that.
So,
just talk to that a little bit.
Not lying, because now I'm like company man, but I always took those with a grain of salt and looked at it as so I listen to lots of beer like podcasts all the time. So plug-in one, I listen to a lot, Steal This Beer, and Augie Carton brings this up a lot of times. Like what Untappd used to give me, like at Saltwater, at Three Sons, was stuff that like McDonald's and like Starbucks has to pay a lot of people to get like market information from. So if you are a brewery that has a bunch of IPAs on and someone comes in and is like, I don't like IPAs, and you get like a lot of those, that's like crazy market research that other companies, to find out that same information, have to pay a lot of money for. And with Untappd, like we're getting this stuff for free. So like maybe that means like we should do a lot more than IPAs. If I have 8 IPAs on and like 1 stout and someone comes in and they blast every single beer because they don't like IPAs, like that's something I can bring to the owner and be like, hey, we need an ESB, which would never happen ever. But like, that's awesome. Like, I feel like information to have and to like remind you of like who is walking into your bar and what are their feelings on like every beer style. So like I always took the I don't like IPAs or there's no Citra in this IPA, like 1 star, as like part of the bad with the awesome free good that you get from something like that. I mean, I remember used to getting constant emails from that dude that'd be like, oh, we'll send like a secret shopper like into your brewery and like try the beers and see how your bartenders are doing and all that stuff. And they want to like charge ridiculous amount of money. Like I'm getting all that free right now. And I just have to like wade through the person that thinks all Hefeweizens taste like just clove and they taste disgusting and rate it 1 star. I'm still getting a lot of valuable information out of that stuff. So I was always not as harsh on Untappd on the brewery side. I would say it was definitely a lot more stressful looking at ratings while I was at Three Sons, because like ratings were important when we were trying to like release hype and we wanted stuff to sell out, and
you want your distributors to buy it, and distributors would straight up say, I will not take anything under a 4.1.
That's where I was going to go, is not necessarily distributors, but they're bars that will say, I will not carry X without such a rating. And it's like, well, this rating is weighted off of what? And sometimes maybe even more frustrating than someone saying, I don't like IPAs 1 star, is something that just says 1 star. You have people who purposely joke on and rate everything 1 star. There are plenty of people who admit to gaming the system and fucking up rankings. Something that this could be another 2 hours of a conversation, but
we're coming back, Dustin.
Kevin said something on an episode that we did about ratings that I really loved, and that was taking if Untappd went in the direction of Rotten Tomatoes and had your users weighted score and actual industry people having a rated score on it. So having brewers, having actual beer writers.
That used to do that.
What was that?
I said it's almost like we own a company that used to do that.
Beer Advocate, the Bros, right?
Yeah,
That
Beer Advocate. They did have the Bros score on that. It's that would be, I think, a really interesting direction for Untappd to go in. And who knows, you could be like, yep, you're nodding your head and you're like, that's something we're working on. Not saying that
or you could be saying now you're going, yeah, go fuck yourself. Yeah.
Me too. That would be great.
You just got me a raise because I'm bringing this up in the next meeting.
I want a finder's fee or something. But it's I love the I love the idea of Untappd as a journaling like tool for people who want to keep track of things and want to just have their voyage through beer. I think that there's something romantic about that. Like that's why I did a beer blog initially. It was prior to that whole thing, and people get to just have it in an app now. But I hate that accounts have actually started to use data from people who might be joking or are weighing heavily on that they don't actually like and saying, I won't buy this because those people who don't like that thing to begin with said that they don't like that thing. That's where I have the issue. But like I said, other than that, I don't know how to fucking fix it. Who the fuck am I?
Well, I actually started using it too for my cellar. So I used to use mybeercellar.beer or mybeercellar.net, one of those. I switched everything onto lists on Untappd. So now my full entire cellar with dates, bottle type, how many I have is now sitting in the app, which is really nice when it.
Like I said, I think that it's a great databasing tool for things like that, journaling, whatever you want to do. Like I even wish that people could just be like, I don't want my reviews to be or my ratings to be public. That would be an awesome little tool. I know you could just say I don't put a SAR on it or whatnot, but there's so much crazy potential, but I also am not a developer and I don't know how any of that shit works.
Well, I imagine to get people involved in this, people like to have their say. And listen, if we were having a conversation with someone that had anything to do with Yelp, I'd be having the same. I'd be saying the same things, right?
We did that in that episode, yeah.
Yeah, it could be a very frustrating thing to see some of these things come through. I'll give you another example, and once again, you've been in these shoes, and that's why I'm encouraged the fact that you're with this company. I know that you're not exactly on that side of the business; you're doing something different. But I had somebody rating Witty and Pink, which now is kind of a defunct brand. We've turned into Wizard and Pink, but they gave it 1 star and said it was the most disgusting thing they ever had. And they took a picture of the can. Wasn't my beer. It was someone else's beer that was called Witty and Pink. And they just said Witty and Pink, and they didn't think to look what the brewery was, right? Like the thought that goes into so many of these ratings is so passive and unimportant. And then when you look at the aggregate of smaller breweries, those ratings mean so much. And for someone from our side and someone from your side, Dustin, and when you were in the industry, more full bore, we look at this and go, what's a way to make this a little bit better and make us feel a little bit more confident in these things? But at the end of the day, as much as I bitch and complain, and I do because I'm me, I love the fact that, listen, at the end of the day, people, hundreds of thousands of people speaking, you will get a good idea of what something is. It's when there's only 20 people speaking that you have a real hard time with some of them. And we were talking about gaming the system, Mike. I mean, I've said it before on this podcast. I have no shame in it. There's a reason why Funky Buddha beers were so highly rated early on. It's because many of us had 4 accounts on Beer Advocate, and we were putting 5 stars and everything and rating them as 100. And it wasn't just people that worked at the brewery. It was people that wanted to trade for it. I mean, Phil Palmisano absolutely put 5 on every single thing. I can't remember the 5. I remember what the Beer Advocate rating system was, but did it so that his trade value of our beers would go up, and then he could get Kate the Great or whatever he wanted to trade for. We know
out, Will. Call the fuck out.
This is not the first time on the podcast, by the way. I think I've said this about 10 times. So this is redundant information.
I think he's doing it with the Beast now, too. I see a bunch of 5-star Beast reviews.
There you go. Listen, it's an oldie but goodie. If you know it works, you go back to it. But we all know these kind of things are happening, and then you can't fix it all. But if there are implementations that can happen that can say, and I love the fact that you mentioned the thing about Beer Advocate and the Bros score, because honestly, as a brewer, and I know that I'm the normal person, that's the score I always look at. Yeah. Even to this day, when I go and look at a beer and I pull it up, I go, oh, what did the Bros say?
Yeah.
Because I know that that's going to be a more informed understanding of what that beer is going to mean to me than it is for the populace. And, this is the interactions that we have with, the periphery things in our industry that are they're never going to be exactly what we want them to be. They probably shouldn't be exactly what they want them to be, because then they're just servicing us and not the customer base and not the populace.
I was going to say, it'd be funny to have like brewer verified accounts, and now like every Pilsner is like at like 4.8 and every smoothie sour is at like 0.5.
I will not be happy. I will not rest easy until Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is a 5 on Untappd. Sure. I won't be satisfied. I won't be satisfied until beers like that are put up as like the end all be all of the style, which means, by the way, both of you can attest to this, I will never be happy, which we already knew to begin with.
Pale Ale's a 4.9 because Celebration's the 5. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, dude, don't open up this can of bees. Beers are rated to style, not to overall things. So Celebration's a 5 in IPA. Pale Ale's a 5 in
God
Pale
damn
Ales.
it, you're making a point. God damn it.
Touche.
Honestly, I should stop beating Dustin up, and then we should probably bring this thing home.
All right, so let's head into last calls, the point in the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want. Beverage related, unbeverage related. It's unopposed, unobjected, and there's one other thing that I usually say in there, but whatever. We're having fun, and because Dustin is our guest, we will let him go first. So, Dustin, what's your last call?
So, was thinking about this during the call and drinking this bottle, and just drinking bottles in general. I really miss Dogfish 750 milliliter bottles, because all that beer just felt so much more special. And like, I listen to Brewbound all the time and listen about Boston beers, earnings, and all that stuff, and just want to put it out here, since I know Sam probably listens to every single episode. I feel like Dogfish should just kick it back to like 2013, 14 and do like the old labels, like bring 60 Minute with just the green Dogfish logo, bring back Namaste and Midas Touch and all those things. I feel like we would all buy them a lot. So just want to put it out there that I feel like all these brands, and your Anchor bottle made me think of it, because I love porter, and like that bottle is just not good looking. I feel like we need to start going back to like the 2010s labels for a lot of these, grandfather brands, and bring that back. Style gets brought back. I feel like some branding should get brought back.
I have very strong opinions on a lot of that stuff, but I'm not allowed to say anything about it. But that was very good. I like that a lot. I will say, I concur that Dogfish should bring back a number of those 750 brands.
Black and blue.
Black
Yeah.
and blue, red and white, all those goodies.
I wanted to just hopefully make this brief. Is the idea of perfection among art is something that really bothers me, and I wish would go away. As I go through, I talk a lot on the show in these segments about my photography and trying to learn more about technique and all of that, and being frustrated when people point in their ideas of what is art and what isn't art, and I'm frustrated by people trying to tell me what I should be doing art wise instead of just technique wise. And one of the things I really hate is talking about hiding your mistakes. And I think through a lot of life, including art, is we are going to make mistakes, and we should own mistakes, and we should show our vulnerability when making art. And we don't need to put out the most perfect thing every single time for the gram. We should be able to put out things that are maybe a little bit less than that, and be able to admit that and say, hey, I don't like this about this, but other than that, I really do like something else about it, and I wanted to share it with you. I think that we, as a civilization, have become too accustomed to needing to be perfect, and that is just impossible. And I just want us to know that there is growth in mistakes as long as we are willing to admit that we make mistakes. And we should be able to put those out there and say, hey, this is a mistake I made. This is how I am growing from it. This is what I am trying to do to improve through it. With that, make mistakes, grow, and continue to grow through life. There is no level 100 anything, and that at least stops after level 100. You can keep on going. And with that, just keep on going. Kevin.
I will take my time to plug another podcast that is not ours, because honestly, why are you listening to this? This isn't that great. Go listen to the BAOS podcast. Our buddy Craig over there, who I've been on the show multiple times. We've had him here on United We Drink. Had on another guest that we've had, Kelly Meyer, recently. And if you go to the BAOS podcast feed, you can also find them on YouTube. You can hear an incredible conversation between the two of them. For those of you who do not remember, Kelly Meyer, How Not to Start a Damn Brewery. He's a person who owned a brewery in Texas for many years, wrote a book about all the pitfalls and problems that came along with that and why his brewery shut down. He has a podcast, How Not to Start a Damn Brewery, himself, where he talks to fascinating people and talks to them about their breweries and what happened, why they failed, what the issues were. And, we had him on our podcast, and after listening to Craig's podcast, I could not feel any worse. We just sucked. We didn't ask the right questions. It was so much more interesting. He did a better job, and I'll take the full brunt of that because I was one of the ones that pushed to have Kelly on. And I think our podcast was decent. This was really, really good. They really dove into all the problems with the industry and the universality of what we all experience and what is going on behind the scenes for so many of us. And having those conversations about all the breweries that are saying, everything's going great, and we're closing. And why that is. And I thought it was a great conversation. I highly recommend you checking out both those podcasts, How Not to Start a Damn Brewery, BAOS. Check out them together. Listen to that. And then, after that, you can go back and listen to us again.
Yeah, what Kevin said. Dustin, do you want to plug anything? How people can follow you if you want people to follow you, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, if for some reason you want to look at beer pictures, DKJ29 on pretty much everything, you can follow me. And then, my company, Next Glass. So at Next Glass on most stuff, at Get Ollie, and sign up for Untappd and rate beers. Go to Barrel Monks and rate everything a 5 so you can trade it.
Rate
You just became my
here's the
favorite
thing.
guest.
break the system, rate everything 5. Everything 5. Including I remember one time the last little anecdotal story. Someone rated that category 5 hurricane malt beverage that Anheuser-Busch makes as category 5 IPA for our old brewery, rated a 1 with a picture, responded from the brewery account, "Hey, this isn't ours. Can you please remove it?" No, was the response. Like, okay.
Perfect. I appreciate that honesty. I'm not going to do that. That would take seconds, and I don't have those seconds. I'm a brain surgeon. I have lives to save. I believe that's what that person was thinking.
Yeah. Kevin, you want to plug anything?
This is the month of October, at least when we're recording this. I never know when these are going to air. Sometimes I feel that they're going to air like 6 months later. I don't know why. That's irrational. But during the month of October, we support Making Strides Against Breast Cancer. We do a beer this year, Wizard in Pink, our raspberry version of our wheat beer. If you are in the South Florida area or in Florida in general, because the beer is distributed up in really all throughout the state, at least in package, places like Total Wine and more, please go and buy a 4-pack. Come to the tap room and drink a pint. Every one of those 4-packs, every one of those pints, we donate the proceeds to Making Strides. We're trying to raise as much money as possible. Our partners are radiologists. We care about this. We do a lot of work with charity, but this is our one big thing every year that we're really passionate about. It's something really important for all of us, and I hope people will support and buy the brand.
Yeah. This will be out in October of this year, not in the year 2525. So don't worry about that.
I never know.
We've already
why I'm here for
5
you. That
more
is
tech companies by then that this is out.
which I would like to end on this. If we don't get a Next Glass themed Black Mirror episode within the next couple years, I will be very disappointed.
I think just to be safe, do the outro and say thank you for listening to the United We Drink podcast, owned by Next Glass, and we'll see you next time. Just do that, just preemptively, just in case.
Dustin, thank you for joining us. It's been
thanks for
an
having me.
absolute pleasure.
It's so good catching up, man. It's always too long when we get a chance to have a conversation.
Get to talk longer than Chuck E. Cheese this time.
Yeah.
One more time, a big thanks to Dustin for coming on to the show and talking with us. It's a weird and crazy time in the beer industry, and getting to talk to people who have left the industry or are still in the industry but have many different ways of looking at it now, or change perspectives rather. It's, I think, a very eye-opening conversation, and one that I think that we should continue to always be having in this industry. Thank you to all of you for joining in and listening, and we hope that you continue to come back and you keep on enjoying these shows. If there's anything that you think that we should be talking about, hit us up on our social media. We're at United We Drink on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to fucking call it. We're on Blue Sky. We are at United We Drink Pod on Instagram and Threads. And we're also on Facebook. So shoot us a recommendation on any topics that you want to see us talk about, or maybe any guests that you would like to see us talk to. We'll try to reach out to them and get them on the show. Other than that, you can support the show through our sponsors. Go to our website, unitedwedrink.com. Go to the Brands We Love page. If you make purchases through those links, they come back and help us out. We also have our web store, unitedwedrink.com/store, with shirts, buttons, stickers, and totes, and all of that other fun stuff. And And then we're on all of those major podcast networks. I said it before and I'll say it again. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, which apparently that's going away too, just like Stitcher, Amazon Music, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, we are on it. And we appreciate your support. If you're on Apple Podcasts, if you can leave a rate and a review, it takes like a minute, really. We would appreciate that as well. Other than that, thank you. We'll be back again in a couple weeks with a brand new episode. See you then. Cheers.